What's your meaning and purpose? It's the start of a new year. Our country is literally and physically on fire. So let's check in with your meaning and purpose. And if any mention of suicidal ideation is just kind of too much for your mental state right now, skip this video. But I find that it can be often healing to hear someone talk about honestly what is keeping them alive. I like what Albert Camus said when he said, the literal meaning of your life is whatever you're doing that prevents you from killing yourself. But he's also the person who wakes up in the morning and says, should I kill myself or have a cup of coffee? And I want to kind of talk to people who sometimes wake up like that too, or maybe wake up like that more often than not, and check in with your meaning and purpose. Hi, I'm Britt Hurt. Hi, I'm Britt Hartley. I'm an atheist spiritual director with a master's degree in theology, and I lost my faith in my doctorate program, as one does. But I'm still very interested in the question, what does it all mean? In fact, I'm more interested in that question after God died for me, because now I no longer get this nice story of meaning served to me on this platter from religion, and so I have to work harder in order to have my life feel like it's worth living. And I want to start that by saying that the tools that I want to point to here aren't unicorns or rainbows or manifesting bullshit or hold on to your, till your next life. I'm a nihilist. I don't believe in any ultimate meaning or purpose. My best guess is that when we die, I'm going to be worm food, and then I'm going to be fully forgotten in 3 generations entirely, which is your second death. That's when the last person who remembers your name says it for the last time. And I think one day the sun will blow up, and as far as we know, no one will have any record of any of this. Now, for some people who confront death and meaninglessness and nihilism and the void and antinatalism, they easily make this move to optimistic nihilism. I call these people golden retriever people, and I have many of these people in my life. These are people who say, it seems like life will end, and maybe this is my only life. I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to go water skiing. I'm going to enjoy having a cocktail with friends, and I'm going to live it up. And they really do. And they do just fine. I am not one of those people. I barely survived my suicidal ideations when nihilism was at its height for me. I'm a truth seeker by nature, which leads to more suffering statistically. The more news you watch, the more philosophy you read, the more miserable you can become because many truths carry a harsh cost to them. I also rank high in neuroticism and low in extroversion, which is a really bad combination. In fact, some psychologists claim that your capacity for happiness is really determined by your extroversion minus your neuroticism, which means if you're high in extroversion and low in neuroticism, um, neuroticism being your brain ruminating about negative things, then you'll be more wired for happiness. And if you're low in extroversion and high in neuroticism, you're screwed. Your brain is wired for more suffering. And if you add on top of that being a deep feeler, deep thinker, sensitivity to suffering, that's a brain that's going to suffer. And I have one of those. It's bad news for me, but it's good news for you because I learned how to implement meaning and purpose in my life intentionally. It didn't come naturally to me because I'm not one of the golden retriever people. And if it's something you can learn, then that's great news. It means that if you're listening to this video and struggling with the concept of meaninglessness, especially when it feels like the world is on fire, maybe there's something to learn here. Maybe there's a shift that can help that could improve the quality of your life. So there's a lot of things that I'm going to go into in this video. I'm kind of just doing a broad overview, and then I'll come back and dig deeper into all of these concepts. So first, let's talk about what meaning is and why we need it. And for this, I think the best resource is John Vervaeke. I think he's the best voice right now on the meaning crisis and specifically the data behind the meaning crisis. So Vervaeke sees meaning as the way we connect to the world in a way that feels relevant and significant. It's not just abstract, it's not just an intellectual exercise. It's about how things click for us just emotionally, cognitively, even physically. Meaning happens when there's an alignment between ourselves and the world, when we're truly immersed in something that feels like we're a part of something greater. It's really good for us and our mental health, and it's also good for the world. So why do we need it? Why do we need meaning? Meaning is how we navigate life. Without it, we get lost in nihilism or depression or aimlessness. Meaning gives us a sense of purpose and motivation and psychological coherence. And I've experienced full meaninglessness in the void and what it feels like to be totally anchorless. And there's no up or down. There was no way for me to make a decision in this place because it's just complete and total paralysis. And at the time, I really felt like a zombie. I was completely dissociated. I felt like I'm this robot of evolution without free will, and this robot is violent because, to eat means to kill conscious creatures. Even vegans can't fully get around that. And the only reason that I stayed alive was because I had kids, and my video game character that I felt like, because I was so dissociated, was meaningful in their video game. So I stayed alive and I just like played the part, but I was completely dead inside and I was just going through the motions because they didn't know that this was all just a stupid video game. They would experience real pain if they lost their mother. And I was in that place of wishing I was dead, in complete nihilism and meaninglessness and anchorlessness for about 2 years. And every time my kids left the house, I had these really intense ideation fantasies that they would drive off a cliff so I wouldn't have to stay alive for them anymore. So that's like my honest experience with that. But Vervaeke often ties this need for meaning to our evolutionary need to make sense of the world. And once we make sense of the world, then we're able to act effectively in it. And so when life feels meaningful, it helps us to endure suffering and to take on challenges and to thrive in life no matter what is going on in the world. And so we used to think that meaning is like self actualization, like just like checking off our goals. Like, I want to climb Mount Everest and I did it and I checked that off. And maybe in capitalism, that's often how we define meaning because we want to do, we want to accomplish these big goals because there's money involved with that. But when we studied deeper, we found that meaning boils down to what matters to you, even if you don't, and how much do you matter to that thing. And that is really the research that I think John Vervaeke is really pushing forward. That meaning boils down to what matters to you, even if you don't, and how much do you matter to that thing. So the first part of that is something matters to you, even if you don't. I care in my body. My body cares about this. I care that people find joy deconstructing from religion. I hope that continues well after I die. I care about my children's well being. I hope that their thriving continues after I die. I care about suffering, and I care about truth, and I care about freedom, and I care about women's suffering and limitations. I care about people finding tools for nihilism. I hope even after I die that people leave religions that hold back their human development and find tools to be able to do that. My body just naturally cares about these things because as a human, you have some core values that resonate with you more than others. And also you have a story, and this is part of my story. And so it seems to be an evolutionary trait that we spread core values around the tribe. So a tribe where everyone was an artist or everyone only cared about justice would die out, which means you have some story, some values that resonate with you. Or if you've been depressed for a long time and you can't even remember what that feels like, something resonated with you as a kid. Some core value, some story, some struggle resonated with you more than another. The second part of this kind of meaning definition from John Vervaeke is how much do you matter to that thing that matters to you? And this flips the script. Meaning isn't just about feeling connected to something important. It's also realizing that we matter to that thing. So, for example, when we care for others, we contribute to love. When we seek truth, we participate in something bigger than ourselves. It's a reciprocal relationship where we feel part of something meaningful, but we also know that we contribute to it. And that's what makes life rich and fulfilling. But we have to take this to the next level because I had, and sometimes still have, a really annoying voice in my head that says, yeah, but it doesn't ultimately matter. It doesn't really matter. That act of love, that relationship, that cause, that project, it all ends. Everything is stupid. We are never going to be able to create a society that focuses purely on human well-being and human thriving. So what's the point? That voice. And that's when we need some more tools because I tried building meaning in nihilism, in the void, in the abyss, where there's no truth and no self and no hope, and everything crumbled. Like the void consumed all of my efforts except one foundation that could withstand the void essentially. And it's the foundation of building from the point of view of experience. That was a whole new foundation to build a life on. Building a life for a legacy, or it's because it's going to matter a million years from now, or because you're going to change the world. You can't build a life from that place. Maybe anything that we do doesn't matter from that kind of wide lens perspective, but we're missing a key piece here. Consciousness is the only thing that can't be an illusion. It's similar to Descartes' I think, therefore I am. For some reason, and maybe I'll never know why or how, the lights are on. There's an experiential quality to existence. I can suffer more or less. And even if I'm wrong about the nature of existence, and this is all some simulation or some alien computer, even if I'm wrong, that means that I'm something to be wrong about. It still means that I'm experiencing something. It is something to be like a Brittany Hartley. It is something to be like a child. It is something to be like a bat. And this is the place where we can build from that can withstand nihilism. Because when you woke up as a child, you didn't think, what am I going to do today that's going to have meaning in a thousand years? How am I going to build my legacy? We just played. We just built sandcastles to see what happens when we build a moat. And we lose that as we become adults, and we forget how to live like that. But we can return to that place where we build a life based on how we want to experience it. And we can also infuse meaning into that. So no one says, for example, I'm not going to watch this movie because it ends. Why would I start a movie that ends? We say, I don't like horror movies, but I'm really excited to see this show. Or for me personally, I am dying to see the next season of Severance, which starts on Friday. I literally can't wait. Why? What's the purpose? Is it to check it off a list to get it done? No, it's the experience of it. I'm excited to go on the journey of watching the show. And so we have to now ask ourselves, what are the sandcastles worth building, even though the wave will come? What is the movie of my life that I want to experience just for the journey of it? Or if we go back to, if you're dissociated and you feel like you're in the Matrix, or you're playing a video game, or you're in the Truman Show, what is how can you change the nature of the game until it's one that you want to play? Gamers don't play video games just to get to the end or because it's ultimately meaningful. They play because the game is what they want to play. And so when I asked myself, when I was in my deepest nihilism, the question, what are the sandcastles worth building just for the experience of it? That's when my life got better. That's when I started spiraling upward instead of downward into the void and suicide. And so now my life is meaningful, not because I matter in 1,000 years or because I'm going to change the world, but because all in all, I'm glad that I got to stick my head out and experience existence. But I'm only glad of that now because I built my life on what I want to be experiencing. And I took big risks in that direction. I quit theology school. I started a career as an atheist spiritual director. I did a program for it, for spiritual direction, 2-year program. But atheist spiritual director, like, what job is that? I don't know. I made it up. I made up that title because that's what I want to do. I want to talk to people about meaning and death and awe and the worst and best of what it means to be human and all kinds of things. But I didn't want to do it in the context of a God that I didn't believe in anymore. So I made a big risk into authentically what I wanted to do. I wanted to talk to people about their most honest experience about being human. I was unhappy in my marriage and I took big risks to be more authentic. My marriage fell apart and it had to be rebuilt. I changed my relationship to motherhood. I love talking to my kids in the car and going to movies together, but I don't try to do all the mom things like I used to. I stopped scrapbooking and I stopped doing things that made me hate motherhood. I dropped a lot of friends and family, and a lot of people dropped me, but I found a few people that I could be honest with about my life, and I deeply invested in those relationships and took really big risks of vulnerability. I tell my girlfriends about my dreams, or if I'm having a hard time or an idea that I'm interested in, but I only found them because I took bigger social risks to find people that I wanted to do life with. And my entire life, from top to bottom, every aspect of my life changed. And it took about a year, but a year later, I really went from waking up every day wanting to die. It took about a year, but a year later, I went from waking up every day wanting to die to being surprised that I was glad to be alive to experience that day. And sometimes I even start my day on my deathbed, and I can do this now because I've made peace with death, but I will literally start my day laying down, imagining this is it. This is the last week of my life. My body doesn't work anymore. My brain doesn't work anymore. My only experiences now are in the past and it's over. And it sounds morbid, but that day is coming for everyone. And then something magical happens. As I'm imagining, being on my deathbed or being in the last week of life, I get to wake up and jump into my 39-year-old body. And then I get out of bed and I'm able to walk and I'm just filled with gratitude. And my youngest child, who is 6 years old, can still lay on my chest in the morning. And I can go make French toast and really taste it almost like it's for the first time. And then I'll go on a walk with my dog and listen to a podcast exploring some new idea that gets me excited. And then I'll take part in a conversation for a YouTube channel where we talk honestly about being human without pretense. And then that weekend, I'm glad that I got to take my daughters to the Barbie movie, and I care about the world being better for them than it was for me. And every time that my daughters are able to do something that I wasn't able to do at that age, it's meaningful. I feel something. It feels meaningful. And even when I'm doing chores, because life isn't all peak experiences. Even when I'm doing chores, I can sit and just pay attention to how pleasurable warm water can feel on my hands while I'm doing dishes. Or when I'm wrestling with the chaos in my home, I can be grateful that I have this little corner of the universe to wrestle with the chaos and create enough order to calm down my nervous system so that I can write, because I love writing and I love watching myself write. And I get into a kind of flow state, which is very enjoyable. This is something John Vervaeke talks about too, which is getting into flow states where our experience of life, like our actions and our experiences, really just come together and you're just in the flow of experience itself. It's very good for us. When I'm in the car, instead of just like ruminating and being neurotic, I realize that I'm flying through space on a space rock in a car that I couldn't possibly build, listening to sound waves from Weezer that hit my ear, that make my body want to scream the lyrics at the top of my lungs, and my brain interprets those sound waves by some magical process that I don't understand. And then my body like does this little dance in the car. It starts to want to move. Like, life is absurd and it's insane, but when we build our life paying attention to experience itself, then we can simply enjoy life for the sake of being alive, nothing more than that. And that was the only foundation that I was able to build in nihilism. And I tried many other kind of foundations of knowledge. And I can shift into this now at any time, and I have shortcuts to this place. So, for example, taking a shower in the morning. I wake up in a grumpy mood more often than not. Uh, Almost every morning of my life since puberty. My family knows this. And sometimes I sit in the shower, when I go in the shower, I just kind of brood and I'm just miserable. But if I can remind myself to tap into experience, I sit down in the shower and I put my hands out like this, and I try to explain to an alien what it feels like to have water landing on your hands. And it's just a cue that I do that helps me to really, really focus in on the experience. And I realized that having hot water in the morning for most of human history would have been something reserved for kings. And having hot water fall on your open hands when you're paying attention is a very intense and even pleasurable experience. And now I'm having an entirely different kind of shower where I'm filled with awe and I'm paying attention to my experience and I'm feeling gratitude and I'm really feeling, versus the shower where I'm just kind of like sitting there, just like ruminating and being negative in my thought spiral. So here is my top 10 list for how you go from meaninglessness and purposelessness to a life that is worth being awake for, even though your life is never going to be perfect and it's probably never going to be easy and you're probably always going to there's always going to be suffering. But there is a way to focus in on experience and shift your life and build on that so that you really say this is a ride that's worth being on. So, number 1 on my list, take care of your body. For some people, especially if you're dissociated, sometimes it's helpful to like take a step back and pretend like you're an animal in an environment and you're the zookeeper and you're taking notes, like the tiger acts more irritated on this kind of food. The tiger is restless without his afternoon walk. The tiger cannot do anything because it is overwhelmed by the clutter in the enclosure. our thoughts change based on our body. We're really not seeing reality clearly, and we're going to need your body to get involved here because we need, your resonances. We're going to need you paying attention to your experience. We need your brain at its best. So sunshine, the vitamin D, the walks, the healthy food, it sounds stupid when you're dealing with nihilism because you're like, why, what does that have to do with these philosophical problems? But you are not an objective viewer of the universe, and we need your brain at its best. So don't go on a diet because society says you should. We are all going into the ground. We are all going to the same place. But do start taking care of your body because that's the place where you're going to be spending all your time. And that's the place where you're going to either suffer more or less. And what happened when I was kind of crawling out of meaninglessness in the void was I started to take care of myself a little better. And then I'd find a tool for nihilism and a perspective shift. And then I'd start, taking a walk, and I'd add that, and then I'd find another tool for nihilism or a story that was inspiring, and then I'm taking my and when you're doing that at the same time, you start spiraling upward where your quality of life really starts improving until you get to the point where, oh, I'm glad that I get to experience being alive. Number 2, psychedelics. Find a guide around you. Try for between 3.4 to 5 grams of psilocybin, especially if you have depression, and especially if your meaninglessness has like totally just turned you off, like if you are just dead inside. It can help you get back into your body and remind you of what it was like to be a child and give your nervous system a reset. Don't ask me about this. I live in Idaho. Find a guide near you. Make sure you find one that you can trust and someone who can do reintegration therapy afterwards. But if you're really stuck, and there were times where like I had tools for nihilism, but they just weren't settling into my body. I didn't feel anything because I was just so shut down. And so some of the tools that have helped me didn't help until after I did psychedelics and just give my brain and nervous system a reset and wake up a little bit. And then I was able to utilize those tools. And I had the mental energy to utilize those tools to make my life better. Number 3, we build meaning by paying attention to what matters to us, even if you don't. So ask yourself the question, what matters for you? What matters for a client that I had last week is she fosters cats. And that week she got a cat that took human contact on her belly for the first time. And she felt bad calling that meaning because there was still like kind of the religious brain part of her that felt like it needed something bigger. But in her body, in that experience of slowly getting an abused creature on this planet to accept love and trust, her body was screaming at her, this is meaningful, this matters. She cares about animal suffering ever since she was a little girl. And that cat benefited from the fact that animal suffering mattered to her enough for her to matter to it. So, now, does it matter in a million years that cat got to, get a belly scratch? Maybe not. Nihilism takes away all of that. But to that human and that cat, and in that moment, it mattered. It mattered in that moment, and we can build on that, and we can start to live our life from that place. So what matters to you? Number 4, start taking risks. The gem of meaninglessness is you have this moment like in the Truman Show where he realizes that this is just a game, and he goes like this and he stops the buses, and he goes on the ship that he was scared to do, because he now has kind of the bravery to push in, and he opens that door into the unknown, because once you realize that you're going to die and nothing matters and everyone's opinions of you are just mouth sounds coming from apes that will be worm food soon, it doesn't have as much of a hold on you. And then you can start taking big risks. Anyone who has survived meaninglessness, all the philosophers, all the stories, all the people that I've met had to take big risks into authenticity and create a life that was so unique, only they would want to live it. And if life is an absurd game, we have to start moving the walls around until it's the kind of game that you want to play. And it should look like you in a way, like your life should look like yours in a way that's nobody else's, because you're a little different than every other human on this planet. And so your life should look like yours. So we have to start taking big risks into that authentic life that's worth living at the level of experience. Number 5, reconnect to how you were as a kid. There's a reason Just about every mystic, including Jesus, including the Buddha, talk about returning to beginner's mind or becoming like a little child again. And I'm not talking about like naivety. I'm talking about how you were when you were a kid, when you didn't think about ultimate meaning at all. You were just in your body. You just played. Even when it was a chore, you made a game out of it. So for me, when I was a child, I was curious in all directions and I always wanted to know why. And it's still how I play today. I don't seek truth because I think I'm right or I have my identity wrapped around it, or because I think that I know the secrets of the universe. I gave up on that project more or less because I don't even know if we're interacting with ultimate reality at all. I play games with ideas because it's my favorite game to play. It's what I did as a kid. I knew in the third grade that I wanted to be a history teacher. I can remember it clearly. I'm in Blacksburg, Virginia. I'm in third grade. We're in social studies. We're learning about the Native Americans in our area. And I remember thinking, these people are just like me, even though their world was so different. How is that possible? What does it mean to be human? And it was always what I was interested in. And so now I try to play like I did was when I was a kid. Right now I'm in a volleyball league, like just a really just like a rec league of volleyball because it's how I played when I was a kid and it's fun to play in my body in that way. I play with new ideas even though I don't think I'm ever going to know what the hell is going on with reality. And I look forward to my shows and I take my kids to the Scholastic Book Fair because at the time I was too poor, but now when I get to take them, my inner child feels happy. I wear sweatpants and, and sweaters most of the time because who the hell cares? I really, I've always wanted my clothes to be the least interesting thing about me and the thing that my brain spends the least amount of time with because it's not how I express myself. It's not how I play. And so you see this with mystics. How do you play in the world? And how can you go back to that place when we've forgotten how to do that as adults? There's this famous Alan Watts quote about play that goes something like this. He says, this is the real secret of life, to be completely engaged with what we are doing in the here and now. And instead of calling it work, realizing that it's play. And so Alan Watts often emphasized that life at its core is this kind of cosmic game or dance, and our suffering comes from taking it too seriously. So he encouraged people to approach life with this curiosity and wonder and lightheartedness, just like when we were children, we were playing. And by shifting our perspective from kind of like grinding through life and I got to get through this week, we can find joy and freedom even in the ordinary and in the simple. Number 6, become the author of your own story. Reframe your life as a story that you get to write. Even if the universe is indifferent, you can create coherence and satisfaction by crafting your own plot twists and character arcs and resolutions and battles. And I choose the characters in my story more or less. I choose the battles that I want to be a part of. I choose the evils that I want to fight and the people that I want to do it with. And I choose to be a part of a story that's worth being awake for, even though I think that I will ultimately lose in the battle of secularism versus religion. It's such a worthy fight, and there's so much meaning in helping people find ways to be more free and find more tools to be able to face harsh truths of reality that I'm enjoying it anyways, even if I'll lose. It's this concept of, choosing the ball to roll up the hill like Sisyphus, even if it's ultimately meaningless because the ball keeps rolling down. There's this quote from Camus that says, "One must find Sisyphus happy." There's value in the journey when it's a journey that you want to take. Maybe that journey is overcoming poverty. Maybe it's to take care of your family in a way that you were never taken care of. Choose a worthy story and you have more freedom than you think you do. When you hear someone else's story and they say, "I'm trapped," you say, "Move, break up with that guy. Sell your house, move to a tiny home so that you can write the novel that you've had in your head that you would really regret not doing." You have so much more freedom than you think you do, but our brains have these biases that want to keep us from doing new things sometimes or doing things against the grain of the mores of society. But we really do have more freedom than we think we do to create a story that's worth being awake for. Number 7, make art for no ultimate purpose at all. Not to become famous with it, not to change the world with it, because it's a way to explore what you are and existence itself. When words fail, art and music and other forms of creativity can provide a powerful sense of purpose and just enjoyment. Creating something tangible out of the intangible gives meaning to the experience, whether others see it or not. Creation is this act of rebellion against the void. It says, "I was here and I'm exploring what it is to be here." It's not about skill or recognition, it's the process of self expression. And so I don't run a TikTok account for the fame that comes with talking about secular spirituality. Trust me, there's not a lot of money in atheistic spirituality. I do it because it's a journal, because probably no one ever said that combination of words before. And I enjoyed weaving those words. Nietzsche had several profound quotes about art, but one of his most famous is, "We have art so that we shall not die of reality." Go make some art for no reason other than just to feel and express and be. Number 8, radical acceptance. Grieve for what you lost. Be mad at the universe for creating you smart enough to ask questions that have no answer. Cry because you don't know how the story ends. I hate that one. I hate that I'm a part of the story of humanity. And as a history teacher, I got to see some of that story. And I don't know how our story ends. Like, I hate that. I'm angry at that, and I have to sometimes I cry about that. Sometimes I'm sad. Mourn that you're gonna die. Scream at the universe that it could have been better than this. It should have been better than this. We can imagine a better world than this. And I couldn't have done this all at once. Sometimes we go through this in stages, just like the death of a loved one. We go through stages of grief and resistance, but hopefully, finally, we get to acceptance, that you get to experience existence at a time when YouTube exists. It means that there's a lot of things to experience that are worth experiencing by being alive today. It also means that you're going to get to see more suffering in your phone in one day than most people experienced in a lifetime in human history. You were born and you'll die, and the elements that are you were forged in stars, and by some process that is mysterious, the lights are on and you're alive, and it's your turn to experience existence. And then when your turn is over, the elements that were you get to be part of other things in this web of life. Maybe it could have been different. Maybe it should have been different, but it's not. This is the reality. And when we go through the grieving process for what we're upset about or what we feel like should have been better about the world, we can get to radical acceptance, and we can just accept that this is what is and find a way then to dance through it once we have that deep acceptance. Number 9, get into flow states. Flow states are deeply meaningful because they align effort and enjoyment, and it fully immerses us in activity. It can be art, but it can also be surfing. Flow states are deeply meaningful because there's this harmony between the challenge and the skill, and time seems to just disappear, and your self-consciousness fades, and your neurotic, thought spirals start to fade, and the task itself becomes intrinsically rewarding. That's what we're going for with our shift into experience over ultimate meaning. Flow states are not only enjoyable, but it cultivates a sense of purpose and mastery and deep engagement with life itself. And my last one on my list, become a wounded healer. You have been hurt somewhere in your life. Something happened to you that shouldn't have happened. And when you help someone in the way that you needed help, it is always intrinsically meaningful, even if that person eventually dies, because in that moment, your pain turned into something beautiful in the world. When your pain changes something in the world, it means that someone or something else doesn't get to feel that. It means that you created something beautiful out of the pain, and it makes the world a better place for your being here. The more you build your life on that, the more you feel that your life has meaning. I'm not just a religious deconstruction coach because I try and help people. I do, and that's good. But if I was in my hardcore nihilism, I'd be so dissociated that I wouldn't even care that it's about that. It's also selfish for me. Every time I get to help someone in a place where I got stuck for years, or I would have paid $1 million for someone to talk to me about because I felt crazy, it feels meaningful for me too. So this is how we spiral out of the void of meaninglessness. Take care of your body and brain. That's where you're going to be spending your time. Psychedelics can help if you are really stuck. Pay attention to where you suffer less and what matters to you. Take bigger risks into that direction. Start writing your own story. Create your own video game. Choose what battle you want to fight. What corner of the universe could benefit from your voice or experience or perspective? Start to play like you did when you were a kid, even when you're doing dishes. Make art, accept reality, stop fighting against it. Get into flow states where you're fully immersed in experience itself and you're not in your neurotic brain. Live for no other meaning than the experience of being alive and improving that experience for you and others. And so when the ride is over, we get to say, that was a hell of a ride. And I'm glad that I got to be on it. I'm glad that I got to stick my head out in the universe and experience being alive. I got to see sunsets. I got to feel the fire on my hands. I got to open a present for Christmas. I got to have a drink with a friend. Life was cruel and hard and sometimes absurd and stupid, but I got stronger and the world suffered a little less because I was here. Perhaps that's not as grand of a goal as the stories religion will tell you, but it's a life with eyes wide open. It's a brave life. It's an intentional life. It's a life knowing that even if it's ultimately meaningless and that you'll die, you're finding beauty in the absurd and you're experiencing the dance of existence, anyways. The benefit of being honed in on your meaning is that no matter what's going on in the world, whatever the world is going to do, you have some emotional resilience because you know what you're about and you know what you're here to do and what you're here to experience. When we are living from meaning and from experience itself with that meaning, it means that life wouldn't change for you even if I told you that you had a month to live, or even if I told you that a comet was going to hit the earth in a year. I would keep doing exactly what I'm doing because my meaning has already compensated for death and absurdity and impending doom. That's already built into my system. I would still make French toast in the morning and watch Harry Potter with my kids. I would still do my work and help people because in that moment it's still meaningful. I'd still take a walk and listen to a podcast because I enjoy it and it's good for my brain and it helps me enjoy life more. And when Trump won the presidency and I had a lot of clients that essentially wanted to give up because they were so disheartened, I didn't feel like that because I'm focused in on my own meaning of life and the game that I'm playing. And so even if we never evolve away from religion and political religions and demagogues and capitalism, I know where I can relieve suffering. I'm still happy to be doing my thing. I know that I'm important. I know what causes are important to me, and I know that I'm important to those causes. I know what I'm fighting for, even if it's a losing battle, because I know what I'd want the world to be, even if it's not. And I feel meaning and purpose, and that my life matters when I'm a part of what I would want the world to be, even though it's not. Even if your life isn't privileged, this is how Viktor Frankl helped people who were in the Holocaust, in a concentration camp. He helped them find their core values and then find something worth being alive for, even though they'd lost everything. And the ones who decided, I'm going to find humor in my situation, I'm going to make people laugh, or the ones who decided, I want to survive so that I can tell my story, they were more likely to survive. And if they did survive, they were more likely to walk away with less PTSD. It's like the movie Life is Beautiful. It's an awful situation, but he created his own game within it for the sake of his son and his wife that he loved. And in some ways, we all have to do that. Nihilism hits the rich and the poor because none of us escape death. And we all probably have a moment where we sit there and say, what is the point to this? What is the point to any of this? Leo Tolstoy is one of the greatest writers in history. He wrestled deeply with the meaning of life. He achieved monumental success. He had a career. He was already a famous author. He had built a family. He had wealth, and he had a midlife crisis, and he was just plagued by existential despair. He had everything that society deemed meaningful, and he couldn't shake the question, I'm going to die. What is the point? So for 4 years, he was in meaninglessness. He told his servants that he couldn't have a rope in his house because he was afraid that he would kill himself. And he has this beautiful, I don't have time to go into it today, but he has this beautiful parable of being a traveler clinging to a branch above a deep well. And above him, there's a dragon waiting to devour him. And below, there's another dragon that's lurking in the darkness. And while he clung to the branch, there were mice that were gnawing at it. And he realized that his fall was inevitable. And for him, he just woke up every day for 4 years with this constant sense of impending doom. And so this parable just haunted Tolstoy because it mirrored his inner reality that life seemed like futile clinging to existence before inevitable annihilation. He deeply considered suicide because he thought it was the only logical response to the absurdity of life. Then he started to explore philosophy, specifically mystics, even Jesus, and found a shift in perspective. Rather than seeking ultimate objective purpose, he began to focus on living in harmony with his values. He started connecting with others. He started gardening with peasants. He started to embrace the experience of life itself. Meaning doesn't have to come from something eternal or grand. It can emerge from how we live in the face of our inevitable death and how we live according to the values that we feel in our bodies and the stories and battles and the love that we wish was in the world that sometimes isn't, and living according to that. And he lived like that for the rest of his life. In fact, we call his way of life now Tolstoyanism. And the point is to make isn't to, help you to follow Tolstoy. The point is for you to create your own ism. So Tolstoy's story and Viktor Frankl, anyone else who survived meaninglessness and suffering and absurdity, did it by changing their relationship to life itself. That life isn't meaningful for ultimate meaning or a million years from now. It's for experience. And when we focus on experience, we find the core values that matter to us. We find projects that are worth the effort and people worth being there for. We find ways to suffer more or less for ourselves and others, and our efforts actually change how much we suffer and how much others suffer. And so we matter. And if in the end we choose to end our lives, even though I do think that people have a right to die, I really do think that we lose something. We lose that person's voice in the world. We lose what they could have done. We all suffer more because of it. And we have to work to make the world a better place in their honor, because the world wasn't good enough for them to justify being alive. So nothing that you will do in 2025 will matter in the end. The sun will blow up. No one will know any of us were here. You won't be famous. The vast majority of the world will forget about you. But you can still make it a ride worth taking, a video game worth playing, a fight worth fighting, a movie worth watching, an experience worth having rather than non-being. So for more on meaning, on tools for nihilism, please subscribe here to No Nonsense Spirituality. I really want to talk this year about tools for the good life, even though we're going to die. And this year, I want to talk a lot more about existential fears and antinatalism and free will and absurdism, but also tools without dogma or nonsense that helps us make life more worth living anyways. So if this video is specifically scratching an itch and you really want to dive in, check the link in the comments below for the link to my full nihilism course, which goes into all of the ways to kind of find your meaning and start living by it. And I'll see you next week. Next week, I'm going to do a little bit lighter of a video. I'm going to show you my top 10 favorite nihilists in pop culture. So check in with your meaning as you're starting this new year, and subscribe here for more content on how we can make a life worth living, even without shying away from the harsh truths of reality. All right, bye.